Hi, everyone, and welcome to There's a Workshop for That. Today, I'm absolutely delighted to have a very special guest with us, someone I've been a huge fan in 2024 because of her videos. Her name is Emily Gardner. If you've been on LinkedIn, you might recognize her from her brilliant short videos packed with practical advice for facilitators and trainers. She has an incredible way of breaking things down, and her insights always leave me inspired. On top of that, she's preparing to release our first book, The Path of the Guide, a framework for effective corporate facilitation, which will be released next month. And I had the great pleasure and privilege to have an advanced copy of this. It brilliantly lays out everything facilitators need to consider, and she shares so much resources in it. Today, we'll be diving into one of my favorite chapters called Creating the Map, which to me captures the essence of what makes facilitation so impactful. Preparation. Emily, welcome to the podcast. It's a real pleasure to have you here.
Hi, Nathy. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. And it's also been a pleasure to connect with you across 2024. And thanks so much for, reading the book and your feedback and advice. It's been wonderful.
Yeah, it was a great pleasure to read it just before Christmas, actually. It was my little Christmas present, and we will talk about it. But before that, can you start by sharing a little bit of yourself, of your background, and how did you come into facilitation?
Sure. So, as I'm sure is common amongst, maybe all of your podcast guests, I didn't start my career in facilitation. Growing up, I knew the things that I like to do. I love to tell stories. I was a theatre kid. I still am at heart. So I like to entertain and engage with people. And I really didn't know how I could bring those skills into my later life. So when I went to university, I studied English literature. I didn't do so much of those things that I grew up with. And when it came to finding my first job, I just thought, I don't know how to use my skills in the right way. I don't know what I want to do. I'm just going to find something with as much diversity as possible. So I ended up going on a graduate scheme where I could do loads and loads of different things over a 2-year period. And during those 2 years, a lucky coincidence happened. I was always looking for ways to apply these skills and these abilities that I had. And I ended up, by complete coincidence, in the innovation department of this big company that I was working for. When I say department, it was me and one other person. He had just been tasked with running an innovation day for the company. They'd never had one before. So he and I sat down together and we started planning what would become my very first workshop. And of course, I loved it. I thought this brings together everything that I love, everything that I enjoy doing. And we were really doing something in a different way than what this company had experienced before. And from that moment on was really the start of me becoming a facilitator. I thought, this is something I can really get behind. I started to research. I started to define my role within the organization. I started to run workshops. And when the word got around, more and more people wanted these workshops and these experiences. And that enabled me to kind of grow my career in-house. From there, I moved into consultancy. I started working with loads of different organizations doing similar types of things. From then on, I started working with them to create a training business off the back of doing this corporate work because I realized, people really want these skills for themselves. And now I work for myself, training innovators and facilitators. So that's a little bit how I came to the place that I am today as a sort of self-defined facilitator.
Yeah, it's always very interesting to see the backgrounds. I should make a book about all the backgrounds of all the guests of the podcast because nobody started with facilitation.
Yeah.
So very interesting. So you have run workshops and workshops. You have leveraged your own skills. I know because I have these beautiful books here right to me that you have read a lot of books, made a lot of research. what inspires you to write your own book?
Yeah, sure. So I think it comes back to the point that we just mentioned. You said that you don't think you've ever had anyone on this podcast that said they started their career in facilitation. Honestly, I think this will change. I think in 10 years' time, people will realize that facilitation is a truly important and essential skill, whatever your role is within that organization that you're working, especially with AI and automation. These soft skills, these people skills are just going to become more and more important.
Yeah.
But my observation for now is that things are still as they are when I started facilitating, which is that people who have a natural passion for facilitation don't really have a way to get started, and they can feel like they're on their own. The reason that there's so many references in this book that I've written is that I was doing this for myself because I just wanted to know more about this topic and to learn about it. And what inspired me to write the book was putting everything that I had learned into one place with some simple things that people can just pick up and get moving. Or if you're already a facilitator, something that you can use as kind of like a handbook and a guide to become more and more effective. I think I shared this with you last time we spoke, but I started writing the book by accident when I would run workshops and trainings, and then afterwards I would write notes to myself about what worked really well or what didn't work. Or working with lots of different organizations in consultancy, you come to realize the common things that are really effective and successful. And one day I opened this Word document. I thought, wow, this could be a book. This is a book. Yeah. So I guess it's there to help other people on their journey to becoming a facilitator or becoming a better facilitator. But it's also quite emotional for me in the sense that it is the result of this journey that I myself have taken to be where I am today. So that's really what drives me and inspires me, is helping other people to become facilitators.
Yeah, and it shows also that taking notes after everything that you're doing, reviewing, reflecting, it can bring to something like a book. I mean, this is a great resource, and I really like it. Today we will explore one of the chapter called Creating the Map. And I would love, if you allow me, I would love to read the first 2 sentences of this beautiful chapter.
Go for it.
Okay. So it's two simple sentences that make so much sense and that resonates particularly at the time I was reading this. And it says, it's impossible to say if we've reached our destination if we don't know where we are going. And if we don't know where we are going, we don't know how we'll get there. And this is so crucial. I'm working like you as a freelance workshop facilitator. And I had last year to cancel one workshop which was actually very important to me, with a big known company. But I couldn't find out, maybe it was my mistake, but even through several meetings, I couldn't find out where they wanted to go, actually. What was the result they were aiming for? Because it changed every time we had a conversation. So I was trying to imagine, but it was a guessing game. And I had the feeling it would not be valuable for the team if we can't decide from the beginning where we are going to. So I really like this sentence. And this chapter is about all the preparation. And I would like you to tell us upfront, what is this chapter for you about, and what are the 4 key elements that you need to create this map?
Sure. By the way, I think you're right about the preparation side. I think facilitation is 90% preparation, 10% improvisation, right? And for me, the preparation is what allows you to be authentic and spontaneous and read the needs in the room, as you have to do. Preparation doesn't mean not being flexible, because flexibility is essential to facilitation, but I think it really gives you the groundwork in order to be successful. For me, this idea of creating a map is all about having something for yourself as the facilitator that is really how you're going to take your participants from something to another thing. So to achieve the outcomes of the session and to take people on the journey that they need to go on. Now, when I'm talking sometimes to people about what I call the map, they say, okay, well, what you mean then is your agenda. Or I think for yourself, Nathy, you call it your roadmap.
Roadmap.
You know, that thing that you have for yourself that tells you how you're going to meet the outcomes of the session. Well, that's just the agenda. But for me, it's actually more than that. So the map is not just the route through the session. It's not just the nuts and the bolts of what will happen, but also how we're going to do that through meeting the needs of our participants and keeping everybody engaged and included. So in my mind, the map has actually 4 elements. The first element is the agenda. So knowing where we're going and how we're going to get there. And of course, that is essential. But there's some other things we need to consider as well. One of them is the interaction mode. So creating diversity in the way that participants can take in and process information during our session. Personalities is also very important. So who's coming along and how can we build the session for everybody? And finally, and I think possibly in my mind, this is the most important topic to discuss because when I'm working with first-time facilitators, this is often an area they neglect, is the idea of the energy. So not having it just 100% all the time, Duracell bunny, everything's crazy, but having high moments and also moments of lower energy is important as well. So when I talk about creating a map, it's blending these 4 elements to create something that allows us to be successful.
And we could talk about all the elements today, but I think we will not have enough time, and this is a shame. But starting with the first thing, so if I listen to you, there are mapping the map, interaction mode, personalities, energies, and we will pick 2 of them. So in the book, you tie the part agenda building to Parkinson law, and I'm sure some of us don't know what it is, so you will explain it. Could you explain your approach and why this principle is so effective?
So this idea of utilizing Parkinson's law as part of the agenda mapping came to me after I attended a workshop with a neuroscientist, and it was about stress, actually. And she was saying that stress is a strange thing because oftentimes people think that stress is bad, but a certain level of stress actually enables our brain to operate at the highest level. Of course, too much stress, we're not going to be able to be successful. Too little stress also, it's not going to push us to get to the right outcomes. I thought this was a really interesting insight. And I was thinking about how this could apply to workshops. And then I came across this concept of Parkinson's law, which is essentially this idea that a task takes the amount of time that is allocated to it. So if I say to you, Nathy, we're going to run an activity and actually you're going to have 15 minutes to do this task, you'll do the task in 15 minutes. If I say to you, we're going to do an activity and it's going to take 5 minutes, you'll still be able to do it in 5 minutes. The difference is that when we give participants 15 minutes to do a task that should really take 5 minutes, we're creating an environment where everybody is going to head off to do this activity. They're going to spend the first 5 minutes maybe talking about the weather. Then they're going to spend another 5 minutes talking about who writes on the flip chart. And then they spend the final 5 minutes doing the activity. And actually, we would get better results by giving 5 minutes for that activity because we're putting people in a state of mind where they're sitting up and listening and saying, wow, we have 5 minutes to do this. It's achievable, but we're going to really need to pull together, focus, get our best thinking in the room. And that's why I think Parkinson's law is so important for workshops, because often people think, well, the more time I give it, the better. You know, I'm running an idea generation session. Why don't we just do it for the whole day? I don't think this is the best way to approach workshops because it doesn't create the right kind of focus in the room that we need to be effective. So my recommendation in the agenda part of this chapter is I tell people to work backwards. So don't start by just assigning the amount of time you're going to take for the session. Work backwards from the outcomes and think, what activities will we need to complete in order to get to this outcome that we're going to achieve? That way you don't have a lot of activities in there that are pointless or are just filling up the time. You're working backwards and then saying, okay, based on this, how long does the session actually need to be? And what I always recommend is put in the activities for the length that feels comfortable and then shave off a minute, because this is where you're going to put people in that right frame of mind where when you say in a moment, we're going to have 5 minutes for this activity, people are thinking, wow, I need to sit up and listen, pay attention, and bring that focus into the exercises that I'm running. This is how Parkinson's law works for me when it comes to planning sessions.
Yeah. And I really like the fact that you say also that you need first to go to the outcome. So knowing where you're coming from, where are your participants at the beginning, knowing where they are at the end. And I put in between the milestones, okay, what do they need to have done? And then how do we do that? So the activities. So the storyline, so to say, the from to is the first starting point, and then looking at the milestones and then looking at how we do this. Really like it.
Absolutely, yeah. And like you said, having clarity on the outcomes is so important, because when we have clarity on the outcomes, we're able to be laser focused about what should be in that session. You know, if we're not sure what should be in the session, then probably our outcomes aren't well enough defined, as you experienced with your client that you mentioned.
Yeah, I had a very broad topic, and a very broad topic who could have been a series of your workshops or one workshop as it was wished. But what was the outcome? So how can I build my storyline? How can I know which activity to do? If it could be an ideation session, or it could be an ideation session plus an action board, or so.
Yeah.
And when you don't know and you don't feel it, I think it needs to be more clarified. And if it's a paid engagement, these are the kind of workshop that I just say, okay, I think you have a clear idea, but your idea is not clear to me. And yeah, so I think it's better when you do this maybe with someone who understands better.
Yeah, 100%.
But I really like the fact that you say, okay, let your mind put your activities, look the comfortable way of doing this, and then apply the Parkinson law and cut it. And most of the time we recognize it works. It works every time.
Yeah, it does. It's something that I found to be super effective. The caveat that I always say is, this map that you have is for yourself and not for the participants, because we want to add in flexibility. We're not going to get it right every single time. We might be in the room and realize, wow, actually, when I said you'll have 5 minutes for this activity, people looked super stressed. You know, it clearly wasn't the right length of time. But because the map is just for ourselves, we can add in, you know, flexibility. We know where we can take and we know where we can give. And that will allow us to correct in the moment anything that's not quite right.
Yeah. And this is something that you explain also in your book, and that I apply to my workshop. For example, you explain it in the context of having a co-facilitator and creating a map, and then agree before the workshop on what could be extended or skipped if there is a change, or if you see that some activities are taking longer. I really liked it because for myself, when I create a workshop, for example, for a 2-day in-person workshop, most of the time I create more.
Yeah.
So that, and I skip most of the activities on the real agenda. And then if I see we have more time, then I have always activities in my backpack or certain exercise that I really like to use, like the 1, 2, 4 all to change formats. But I have my roadmap, what you called your agenda. I have my roadmap, and I know, okay, I can be flexible. And this is exactly the point what we talked about at the very beginning of the podcast. Is preparation is also preparing the spontaneity. It means It's like on a concert. I know that you are also in the music
Yes.
area. When we make a concert, you make a set list and maybe the public will ask for another song, or maybe you don't have time. You have the set list, but you can scratch and change the things. If you don't plan, then you are like, oh my God, what am I doing? And so I really like it.
Exactly. Yeah. I had well, it was a 4-day course that I was running face to face with a client. And on the first day, everybody came in and they said, by the way, they've announced that today we're going to be having an hour-long whole company town hall in the middle of the day. There's some massive announcements that are going to take place apparently. So we're all going to have to leave for this session. And of course, that made a huge difference because not only were we losing an hour from the workshop, it was also obvious that this was going to be some big news and people would need time also to digest the news, right? You can't come straight back into a session after this. And I think, like you said, it's this preparation where you've had the chance to look through in advance and think, okay, if we need to, these are the bits that we can take out and still be effective, that allows you to respond to whatever's happening at that time without being stressed for yourself. Because as the neuroscientist rightly said, when you're too stressed, you're not going to make the best decisions. So the
Exactly.
preparation is essential.
Yeah, exactly. Good. Now we will come to the last part of the chapter 3, where you talked about energy. And what I really like is that in your book, you write that facilitators shouldn't bring all the energy, actually. So we tend to think that we are coming in yoo-hoo and cheerleading everyone. So we are cheerleading, of course. But what you explain is that the energy should come actually from the participants. And our role as a facilitator is to also guide or to manage this energy and knowing when to put it on higher and maybe sometimes for reflection. So I would love to hear about it in your words.
Yeah, definitely. So as with all the things in the book, I derived from personal experiences. When I first started running workshops, I was so confused because I would go home the night after a workshop and I would have really enjoyed it in the moment, I loved it. And then I get home and I feel like I've just been through a breakup or I got a hangover. I want to just watch some romantic comedy with Owen Wilson and I want to eat popcorn and chocolate and lie on the sofa. I'm absolutely destroyed. I was thinking, what is this? I love my job. I don't want to feel terrible every time that I finish running a workshop. But what I realized over time was that when this happened to me, it symbolized the fact that I had put actually too much energy out and not received enough energy back. And nowadays, this is what I tell people, that we have to remember that a workshop is a two-way thing. We rely on the energy of the people in the room to get us through to the outcomes. And indeed, that's the whole point, because we're just there to guide. We're not there to be the leader in the room. We're there to create the right environment where people can bring their own energy and be authentic. And honestly, I believe the way to avoid the workshop hangover for yourself and the way to make workshops truly enjoyable for participants is to think of facilitated workshops as having highs and lows of energy. People think sometimes that workshops need to be 100% all of the time because they're intense. There's lots of things you want to get through. And they want to create a different type of environment to the classic corporate environment, which makes sense. But the way that we do that most effectively is through creating an energy map that goes up and down. So there should be points for people, racing around the room, completing exercises, feeling according to Parkinson's law that they really need to get some work done. But there should also be points of break. There should be points of reflection. There should be points where people are encouraged to take a walk outside or just sit and come up with ideas on their own. Any session should have these highs and lows of energy because that's what makes it sustainable for everyone. And I think it also takes some pressure off ourselves as facilitators because oftentimes when I'm working with people who aspire to be a facilitator, they say, well, I don't think I can really be a facilitator because I'm not this high energy, crazy person. And I'm saying that's okay. Your authentic energy and your natural energy is the one that you should be able to bring into sessions. And that will make them effective if you structure things in the right way. So I think when it comes to energy, it's about the mapping and having the highs and also having the lows of energy to make it sustainable and enjoyable for everyone that you have in the room, including yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. I have some workshops where I come back home and at the next day, I'm on my couch looking at Netflix.
Yeah.
I think it's became like a habit. It's like my,
A reward. Yeah.
But it's true that you really need to catch the energy. Also to manage the energy is also, I know this is another sub-chapter, but it's also managing the different kind of personalities.
Yeah.
Because everyone has a different kind of energy. So it's allowing the extroverts to come out but also allowing the extroverts to shut up for a few minutes so that everyone can reflect and that also their colleagues, the introverts, can have a voice and say something. So managing the energy is really looking, okay, where I understand from your point of view where I put my highs, where I put my lows, and also matching the energy and the personalities and the different energy of the different kind of personalities.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So I think you have to read the whole chapter because we couldn't talk about the whole chapter. But in this chapter, you are writing about the interaction mode, how to get the attention of everyone. You are talking about personalities.
Yeah.
You are putting a lot of resources, a lot of books you have read that I didn't know, by the way, I put on my list. Yeah. So a very nice chapter from a very nice book, Emily. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. I think the one reference I would give on the personalities front, which ties it into the energy, is I reference in the book Susan Cain's book, Quiet, which is all about introverts. And something that she says that really sticks with me is that she calls it, like, I think, the modern fascination with collaboration, which is, of course, what workshops and facilitation is all about. She says that can be very isolating for people who are introverts because oftentimes when we think of collaboration and workshops, we think of an extrovert's world where whoever speaks first is the one that gets to talk and have a great time. And there's other people in the room who dread going to those sorts of environments. But it doesn't have to be that way if we structure with the energy and the personalities in mind. So It comes to inclusion as well when we talk about the personalities.
Yeah, absolutely. If a facilitator could take away just one concept from chapter 3 to apply immediately, what would you recommend?
I think that the energy is a really nice point. So take a session that you just ran or a session that you have coming up where you already have your own agenda, roadmap, and just create a graph, map out the energy. Where are the highs and the lows? And you'll quickly see if there's an area where the energy is too much on a high for too long of a period, or there's no spike of energy. And that will help you to know if you need to restructure a little bit of your session, especially at the beginning. If you have at the beginning a vast period of time where it's just yourself talking, about the session and introduction, someone else does an introduction, you already lost the energy in the room. So take that beginning of your session and change it so there's a spike of energy where everyone can get involved, and you'll definitely see a difference in terms of meeting the outcomes.
Thank you so much, Emily. Your book is coming out next month, but I know that you have a little nugget for our listeners.
Yeah, that's right. So as you mentioned, the book is coming out next month, so March. But right now, the book is on pre-order. This means that you can get a Kindle copy from the Amazon link and it will cost you just 99p. So when the book comes out in March, you can have your 99p copy and you can feel very smug when you look again on the Amazon and see it at its full retail price. Yes, right now, if you're interested to read the book, you can get it for its cheapest ever price, just $19 Amazon.
Thank you very much, Emily. And I will, of course, we will put all the link also to your LinkedIn. You're continuing your little videos, right?
Of course.
Nice. This is my thing that I look at every week are your little videos. Thank you for this. And I wish you all the best for this book. I hope that you will have a lot of readers and maybe you will get inspired for a second book. Who knows?
Thank you so much, Nathy. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Bye-bye.
Hey.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't hesitate to contact our guest. You'll find all the information in the show notes. And hey, if you like the content of There's a Workshop for That, please give it a 5 stars on your podcast app. And you can also subscribe to our YouTube channel, La Workshoppeuse. Also, I'd love to read your comments, suggestions of guests, or any question you have. For this, use the form called Hey Nathy in the show notes. And until our next episode, I wish you good health, success, and lots of happiness. Au revoir!